Hi, I'm Heather. I'm a religious trauma recovery coach. I help people recover from situations where religious teachings were used to shame, guilt trip, manipulate, or otherwise put pressure on people to stay in abusive or toxic situations, even if that pressure was internal messaging they were giving to themselves. But long before I became a coach, I was someone who desperately needed help myself. My backstory is I had grown up in a Christian home. Um, And there had been a couple of incidences of sexual abuse in my early childhood that layered into the abuse I received in my marriage, which is what I'm going to talk about more in this video. My marriage journey started at a time in my young adult life when my dad's life was slipping away from an accident he'd had previously. And at that time, I found myself falling in love with a young Christian man who'd been a friend of our family for years. I'd been told not to jump into love too quickly after losing my dad, but I thought to myself, what could go wrong? This man's got his degree at a Christian university. He loves God. He's been a student missionary. He leads out in church. God is going to be the center of this. Nothing can break our marriage. But within just months of being married to him, what I thought were our plans of traveling and doing mission work abroad got brushed aside by pressure for me to work more so I could help him buy a house and settle down. Not knowing that I'd never get to experience my dream of being a missionary, I thought to myself, well, maybe establishing a home base that we can come back to isn't a bad idea. So I complied. But since my years of college had been interrupted by my dad's years of suffering and death, I was still stuck in low paying jobs. So I decided to go back to school and pursue my dream of being a counselor. However, up until this point, most of my college education had been in either medicine or nursing, which I had decided was something I didn't really want to do. But my husband at the time got angry at the idea of me pursuing something else when finishing my nursing degree would take less time and get me making money in a job faster. So I said to myself, submit, don't create waves, keep the peace. That's what a godly wife does. So once again, I let go of my dreams and complied with what he wanted to do. The most disturbing part of our disagreements was his escalating anger, sometimes exploding into a rage, and other times there'd be days of tense silence. I'd find myself exhausted by scrambling to soften the tension that was between us, which half the time I didn't even understand why it was there. Or I'd be complying with things I didn't agree with to deflect another rage. I tell myself a good Christian wife is supposed to make her husband happy, and that's supposed to make us both happy. But after all my efforts and sacrifice, he never seemed very happy for very long, and I was feeling more afraid of him than anything. I kept fighting feelings of not wanting to have children with such an angry man, but I pushed those feelings down by telling myself that God hates divorce. He made this marriage, so he will make it work. So I buried myself in all the Christian marriage books I could find, but nothing I tried solved our cyclical problems. When I learned about the cycle of abuse in nursing school, I thought to myself, wow, that sounds like my marriage. But he doesn't hit me, so it must not be abuse. So I went on to have two children with him. And it didn't take long before I saw him using the same rage and shaming on them that he used with me. And this time, things began to get more physical. As his punishment of them began to intensify, I became terrified of leaving them at home with him when I had to go to work during the day. And over time, I started waking up to the fact that it's not normal to have to feel like I constantly need to be protecting my children from their own father. Regrettably, I started falling into some unhealthy parenting habits myself, enforcing a rigidity with a sternness I didn't agree with. I was doing it because I was trying to keep their father from getting to them first when he felt they were out of line because I was afraid of what he might do to them in one of his rages. So I was punishing them for things I didn't think were punishable, but I wanted to intervene before their dad did. But in that process, I was losing myself, losing what I believed in as a parent, and I was afraid I was becoming the very thing I was trying to protect my children from. And in my mind, I started crying out, God, You want me to submit to this? I started feeling more desperate for support. So I found a nursing job closer to our hometown where we could move to be by our families. I was hoping the change would help our marriage by having family close by to help watch the kids. But instead, things worsened. My husband became bitter about the move, and the tension was almost constant as he continually nitpicked the kids and me. It was like walking on eggshells when he was home, not knowing when the next explosion would be. And he'd explode over the smallest things. And he worked from home, making it difficult to get a break from him. I'd spend hours and hours crying out to God, clawing my floor in tears, poring over scripture, pleading with God to fix our family, that he would fix me, to make me the wife and mother I needed to be to heal our family. Surely God did not want my children to think that this was a normal and healthy way to do life and relationships. But all I got back was silence and a marriage that continued to deteriorate. I got so depressed, I didn't want to live anymore. I blamed myself for the failing marriage and began to believe that my children, my family, everyone would be better off without me. And so I made a detailed suicide plan. And during this time, I was also experiencing random palpitations and chest pain. My stomach was a constant disaster. I couldn't sleep. I'd often break out into anxious sweats. So after a GI and cardiac workup that didn't reveal anything too significant, I thought I was going crazy. So I decided to try counseling for my anxiety and depression. My first counselor didn't waste any time telling me that I was in an abusive marriage. I didn't want to believe him, so I sought out several others who ended up saying the same thing. It still took me another year of trying to fix our relationship by working on myself in therapy before I finally realized that no matter how long and how hard I work on myself, it doesn't make him take responsibility for his part. So in 2019, after 14 years of marriage, I finally took my kids and left. This began my long and often very lonely healing journey. Many of my church friends and family didn't know what to do with me. They saw my ex's church persona and couldn't understand why I continued to hold my boundaries with him. And many of them, even lifelong friends, started to treat me with a lot more distance. After all, they were praying, they were waiting for the miracle. And to them, I wasn't forgiving enough. I didn't give him enough chances and grace. And I wasn't responding to the miraculous good changes that they were seeing in him. But what they couldn't see was that he was still communicating to me with the same blame, disdain, and dishonesty as he always had. And I knew I couldn't go back even on the pain of being criticized by friends and family. I barely made it out the first time. And I knew I probably wouldn't survive trying to do it again because I could tell that he was still the same person to me by his behaviors toward me. And I can understand the confusion our situation created for the church because my ex knew the Bible and the belief system very well. And he was very good at putting on a public piety that appealed to them to cover up for the treatment of his family at home. And after years of watching him live two very different lives, I completely lost any trust in him. And he gave a lot of fake apologies, which never stood for very long. And there's so much more that happened that I'm not going to go into right now. But I want you to know that I know that my situation is not all that unique. This is such a common scenario that so many people are confronting. There are so many levels of spiritual pressure in trying to get out of toxic situations, especially in church environments. You've got your internal voices, your spouse's voice, your family and friends' voices, voices you believe are coming from God. and the voices of church family members that are sometimes misinformed, etc. That's why it's so important to connect and find support with people who understand these kinds of situations and who are more interested in your healing than pressuring you into some perspective or outcome they think your life should take. Others don't fully know what you've lived with. You do. And maybe you're someone who is carrying your own burdens and wounds from toxic relationships and abuse. Maybe you've been silently crying out for help. Maybe you don't feel like God cares or is listening anymore. Or maybe you're not sure you even believe in God anymore. You're not alone. And I'm not here to judge anyone for having those feelings. To me, it's indicative of the deep pain you've experienced, and that pain is real. If you're feeling that weight of that deep pain right now, I want you to know that you are worthy of healing. You are worthy of finding safety, love, joy, and peace in your life and relationships. And it is not selfish of you to invest in yourself for those things. If any of you think it might be helpful, I recently published my first book called Narcissistic Religion. It challenges the dogma around certain church-based beliefs that are used to pressure people to stay into toxic situations. And I reframe those beliefs with a perspective of love, healing, and freedom. You can find Narcissistic Religion on Amazon.com. And I'm also a certified life coach if anyone feels the need for live conversation and support as they process through their situation. I'd be happy to talk to you. But whatever path you take from here, remember, you are valuable. And whatever steps you take for your healing, you are worth every second of it. For more information, you can find me at heatherkuiken.com. That's Heather, Kuiken.com.